الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى. The first of our loud salawat in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Second in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Third with your loudest voices in honor of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The story of the companions of the cave is one of the most enchanting stories in the Holy Quran, and it's a story from which many lessons can be gained and many examples can be derived which can easily be applied into our own lives. The story is not only historical in terms of its basis, but is also contemporary in terms of its significance. For it affects each and every one of our lives. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates the whole of chapter 18 of the Quran to Surah Al-Kahf. And therefore the story requires a thorough examination in order that we are able to understand the power of this group of youths who were able to escape the idol-worshipping society of their time in order that they were able to safeguard their religion. On the first level, about the fascinating aspect of this story is an emphasis on the importance of stories in our lives. For we find that throughout the world a story is used in order that a message is given in a more simplified manner by the usage of rhetoric and the usage of language, and indeed by the usage of humor. We find that stories appeal to many different genres within society. That the usage of a story is able to transfer a message towards a group of people in a manner which is easily acceptable to them and in a manner in which they are able to comprehend. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Quran uses stories in order that a particular message or a particular principle is transferred towards the reader or is transferred towards the listener. And therefore you find that many prophets of God would use stories in order that they are able to transmit a message towards their people. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran names the whole chapter the stories, because Surah 28 of the Quran is called Surah Al-Qasas. Qassa in the Arabic language means story. Qasas is the plural, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala found that within the Quran the best way of transferring His messages and the best way of allowing us to understand the lives of the prophets of God or of those who follow them was through the usage of stories. Likewise, we find in the Bible that God uses parables to transfer certain messages towards the followers of the Christian religion. And that's why we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, in the Quran says the story of the Prophet Yusuf is Ahsan al-Qasas, the best of stories. Likewise, we find many of the contemporary scholars in the 20th century use stories to transfer messages. For example, Ayatollah Murtada Mutahhari's famous book, Narrations of Veracious, or Ayatollah Dastaghaib's famous book, Al-Qasas Al-Ajiba. Or for example, you found the famous book of Bint al-Huda, the sister of Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. Many of her books were books which spoke about the ideas of stories which transferred messages. Therefore, on the first level, the story of Ashab al-Kahf signifies to us the usage of stories in the Quran. Number two, the story of Ashab al-Kahf is so powerful that it has now been transferred into a film. That a few years ago, a group of directors came together to make this story a film which people were able to watch. And indeed, this is the current that all of us should be following, because of the idea that when you transfer a story from the book to a film, it becomes more easily comprehended. And this has been a current which many have been following recently, where we find that recently many have come forward and produced a film about the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Many have produced a film with the life, many of us would have seen the life of the 8th Imam as well. And indeed, many of us would have seen the film about the life of Mary, mother of Jesus. This new movement is vital, because not only it allows us to understand the stories of some of the greatest personalities in history, but also allows the younger viewers to comprehend the story in an easier way. And the hope is there that one day a film is made about the 10th of Muharram, where the Muslim Ummah comes together in order that we are able to look at the events of the 10th of Muharram away from that which is written and that which is narrated. Number 3, when you examine the story of the companions of the cave, it is a vital examination because it allows for interfaith dialogue. Because the companions of the cave, their story meant that they were regarded as saints by Roman Catholics. Because in Roman martyrology, when you look at the calendar of Roman martyrology, you will find that on the 27th of July, Roman Catholics honor the 7 sleepers of the cave of Ephesus. If you look at their calendars, it's written down that there were 7 sleepers of the cave, and they therefore honor them by saying that they were martyrs who died in the way of God, and that they would be raised alive on the day of judgment. That's why even in the Byzantine calendar, the 4th of August and the 22nd of October were seen as days of commemorating the 7 sleepers of the cave. And until today in the British Museum, you'll find a manuscript which is available, which looks at the original story of the companions of the cave. That's why you find the companions of the cave, originally their story was not in the Bible. Originally, their story came from a high priest of Syria who was called Jack, and then was translated into the book The Glory of the Martyrs by a Latin, or some say a Greek person by the name of Gorgias. Yet we find that their story is an integral feature in Catholic thought, that they were seen as being amongst the saints of Catholicism. Until today, if you go to Catholic theology, you will find that 7 of the saints of Catholic theology were Ashab al-Kahf. And therefore it is vital for us to be able to tell this story to our Catholic brethren in order to open up the doors of interfaith dialogue, because we live in a society today where we live with people of different religions, and that Christianity and Islam make up the greatest number of people in the world today, the greatest religions. When you have a story in the Quran which discusses the saints of Christianity, we have to make sure that this story is told to our Christian brethren. For the Quran says, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَىٰ كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَلَا نُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَتَّخِذْ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ. Rasulullah in his message called out, O people of the book, come to a joint word between us and you. If the Christians revere Ashab al-Kahf, it is therefore vital for us to make sure that this story is given to the Christian community as well. But the 4th and most important aspect of this story is an aspect where the story acts as an exemplar to the youth of our community today. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Ashab al-Kahf, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. They were a group of youths who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are 3 interpretations as to what is meant by youths. One opinion is that they were a group of elders, but because they had Iman, Allah viewed them as youths. A second opinion is that they were a group of elders, but because they had Iman, Allah gave them back their youth. And a third opinion is no, they were a group of youths who had a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word fitya or the word feta, normally it indicates the usage of the youth. And that's why we find that this story is a story that we must tell our youth. Why? Because it talks about the importance of belief in Allah even in a society which is not religious. It talks about the importance of the unity of a group of youth. And it also talks about the idea of how Allah shows us that when a group of youth have belief in Allah, Allah increases them in guidance. For the Quran says, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. In Surah 18 verse 13, they were a group of youths who had belief in Allah, so we increased them in guidance. Meaning that when a group of youths come together and have a belief in Allah, there is an increase in guidance. And that's why in tonight's examination, we ask the following questions. Number one, what are the merits of reciting Surah Al-Kahf? First question. Number two, why was Surah Al-Kahf revealed to Rasulullah? Number three, where was this story taking place and in whose era? Number four, what exactly happened to the companions of the cave? Number five, how did Rasulullah use this story to build an Islamic state which was based on a group of individuals who in many cases were less than 30 years old? Let's examine this area in order that we are able to dissect their story. On the first level, what is the merits of reciting Surah Al-Kahf? Because as we know, Surah Al-Kahf is the 18th chapter in the Quran. And we find that the merits are many. To the extent that our Prophet says that Surah Al-Kahf, he says to his companions, shall I tell you of a story which when it was revealed, 70,000 angels descended with this story. They said to him, which story? He said the story of Ashab al-Kahf. That 70,000 angels were meant to have descended alongside the story that our sixth Imam says, whoever recites Surah Al-Kahf will be raised in the same position as a martyr who died alongside Rasulullah. You see all those great martyrs we hear about in Islamic history. Our sixth Imam says, just recite this story, recite it at home, and you will be raised as a shaheed alongside Rasulullah. On the third level, he says, whoever learns the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, if they recite these 10 on a Thursday night, Allah will forgive them from that Thursday till the following Thursday. Everything you act, Allah will forgive from that Thursday until the following Thursday. Likewise, on the fourth level, Rasulullah says, I promise the one who recites Ashab al-Kahf that they will be safeguarded from being from the army of Dajjal. Now, whether the army of Dajjal is an army which comes to fight the 12th Imam, or whether it be a narrow one-sided ideology which fights the Imam, the point is that Rasulullah says, recite the surah and we will safeguard you. Allah will safeguard you from being amongst the army of Dajjal. Therefore, sometimes you see, sometimes there are stories in the Quran where a person doesn't give them as much attention as other stories. For example, our community will say, Surah 36 of the Quran, Surah Yasin is given much attention. Whereas Surah 18, Surah Al-Kahf, you don't hear many narrations about it at all. You don't hear many about the merits, whereas these are seen as the merits. Number one. Number two, why was Surah Al-Kahf revealed to Rasulullah? It was revealed because what used to happen was that the Meccans of Quraysh used to always want to find ways of finishing the message of Rasulullah. They wanted to find ways of finding flaws in Rasulullah's knowledge, because you imagine, a prophet of God comes to your community. When he comes to your community, there are some people who will submit to his message straight away when they see that he is truthful and he is trustworthy. There are others who will not submit. No, they will say, give us more time, then we'll trust him. Then there's a third group of people who are always troublemakers. You find them until the 21st century. That when somebody good comes to their community, they will always try and find flaws in the person. You see, when man doesn't have a life, they resort to these things. And so what happens is, likewise here, what do we find? That the Meccans, they try to find flaws in whom? They try to find flaws in Rasulullah. Who would they ask? They would ask the Jews. They'd say, give us some questions we can ask him. As in, there must be some things where we can find that this man is a false prophet, where it's written in your books, but he wouldn't know. The Jews would always be ready to give the questions. So the Jews on this occasion said, ask him these 3 questions, he will not know. So they said, what are they? Give it to us quickly. He said the first question is, ask him that what is the ruh of the human being? And the second question is, who was Dhul Qarnayn? And the third question is, which group of youth safeguarded their religion by leaving their land? So when they came to Rasulullah, Rasulullah said, wait, and my Lord will reveal to me. He answered the first question as to who was Dhul Qarnayn, or the first question as to what was the ruh, by saying that little knowledge has been given as to what the ruh is. The famous verse in Surah 17, verse 84 to 85 of the Quran. Then the second question of Dhul Qarnayn, he explained the story of Dhul Qarnayn, the traveling of the east and the west, and the traveling and the help of the people who are oppressed against the leadership which was oppressive, as mentioned in Surah 18 of the Quran. Then he asked the third question, he answered it by saying the story of Ashab al-Kahf. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of just saying to Rasulullah that, you know what, they were a group of youth who safeguarded their religion, no. Allah gave him the whole of Surah 18 of the Quran. In order to tell the Jews that you think you're asking me a question, I don't know the answer, I'm not going to give you a one-lined answer about the people of the cave. No, I'm going to tell you the whole story of Ashab al-Kahf. That's why when we come to the third area, Ashab al-Kahf, their story took place in the land of Ephesus. Ephesus is now modern day Turkey. Many of us would have traveled to Turkey here. There is an area of Turkey called Selçuk. It was originally known as Anatolia. And it was a place which was seen as being important in terms of biblical circles. Why? Because they say the last place Mary was seen was that part of the world. They also say that John the Baptist, according to certain narrations, wrote his gospel in that area. Also they say Paul, in one of his letters to Corinthians, he originally wrote the letter from this particular area, and it was seen that the temple of Ephesus was where one of the wonders of the world was originally placed. That's why we find that when these youths were living in this area, the ruler of the time, his name was Dayqanus. What was his name? Dayqanus. This ruler used to believe in idol worshipping. And he used to subjugate his people into worshipping the idols. Because as we've said on many occasions, whenever you see idol worship, no, it's not a religion. It's just a political tool of dictators to subjugate their people. That's what idol worshipping is. What he used to do was that he used to order his people to worship idols. And that he would be unhappy if he ever heard of anybody who disagreed with him. Many of his people would be following this idea of idol worship, except for this group of youths, Ashab al-Kahf. This group of youths detested idol worshipping, although they came from a very noble family. And the first message that emerges is that just because your family may not be the most religious, does not mean you turn out not to be religious. There are many youths in the world today who say, you know, my parents aren't that religious, that's why I'm not religious. Doesn't matter. You've got your exam, they've got their exam. This group of youths came from a noble family. When the king said to the people, you have to worship the idols, this group of youths came forward and said, we will not worship the idols. Said, why? They said, we worship the Lord who created the heavens and the earth. The all-powerful, the all-seeing, the all-knowing. We worship the Lord who sent messengers towards the children of Israel, who preached the oneness of God, even though the children of Israel may have belied them, may have rejected them. We, the group of youths, worship only one God. Dayqanus could not reply to them. He didn't have a way at all of replying. But he knew they came from a prominent family. So do you know what he said to them? He said, listen, I'm going to give you a day. Go home. Think about what you've said to me. Why? Because he thought these people probably have had a bad day. And they don't necessarily want to believe in that which I believe. Go home, sleep, and tomorrow come back to me and tell me what your opinion is. They had endured a long period of taqiyya, of hiding their faith, until eventually they reached a conclusion. What was their conclusion? Eventually they said, listen, let's leave tonight. Our best option is to leave tonight. We will go and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide us. If we stay until tomorrow, God knows what that ruler will do to us. Maybe we will come to him and say the same words again, and he will attack us again. So what happened was, they decided to leave that night. They left, Of course, in a stage of fear. Because as a youth, there's only a group of you who believe in Allah. The rest of the community doesn't believe. Yet look at the iman that they had. Sometimes some of us, we ask the question, how many rather than what quality? Sometimes people ask, how many are going towards Hajj? Rather than what quality of people are going to Hajj. How many are at the lecture? Rather than what quality of people are at the lecture. You see, the human being normally judges mathematically with numbers. Rather than looking at the essence, they didn't think that there's 7 of us or 8 of us. They thought, you know what? There's a good quantity of us who have quality. And do we have iman? Yes, we do. Let's go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah said, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. Not only did they believe, we have increased them. They left. On their way, they met a shepherd and his dog. When they met the shepherd, some narrations, there are a difference of opinions on the narrations. Some narrations say that the shepherd was an idol worshipper, and he didn't agree with that which they were doing. But some of the narrations say no, that he joined them. There is a difference of opinion. But the point was that his dog definitely joined them. Sometimes you find some people who say, because they had a dog with them, does that mean we can have dogs as well? See, the human being looks for any excuse. Just because they had a dog, we want dogs as well. And there are some people who've actually convinced themselves that a dog is allowed because of Ashab al-Kahf. It's ironic, they forget every hadith of Rasulullah on the dog and go to Ashab al-Kahf. Subhanallah. We use people when we want to. This dog had a purpose. Even in Bihar al-Anwar, there's a narration which says Allah reveals to the dog, because they at the beginning didn't want him to join. This dog kept on running after them. They didn't want the dog to join until eventually the dog kept on following. They tried to remove it. One narration says that Allah inspired the dog because it's part of Allah's plan. As we know, the same animals that can speak to a prophet of God, Allah inspires the dog and says, "O Ashab al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered me to serve you." So the dog joins them. They were chased for 9 years by the emperor. How many years? 9. 9 years, he sent 9 different search parties to go and chase them, to go and find them. They eventually reached the cave and the mountain of Raqim. They reached this cave and they went inside. Of course, naturally you'd be tired. You'd be running away from a town. You are young, you are energetic, but it doesn't matter. You would naturally be tired. They went into this cave. The cave became a sanctuary for them. Why? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the Prophet, the most beloved thing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when a youth turns towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine when a youth turns towards Allah, do you think Allah would neglect them? Allah would make sure that every law of science is broken to protect His youth when they are believers. Do you know what happened? They all went to sleep in the cave. They thought we'll sleep for a day or a part of a day. They slept for a total of 309 years. When they slept for this total of 309 years, one beggars the question and says, how did the search parties of Dayqanus not kill them? And the reply that comes is because they may be powerful, but there is a Lord who created them who is more powerful. Do you know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, that dog, it had a role. It didn't just come because it's man's best friend. It came also to protect them. Its paws, it would be in a position where it looked like it was outstretched at the front of the cave. Now you know if a dog is sitting outstretched looking at you like that, would you think of coming in that cave or no? No. So Allah made that dog in a position outstretched in a way that the people would fear if they saw. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow the heat of the sun to enter and touch their bodies. Why? Because they would move one way because of the heat. Then they would move another way because of the heat. So there is constant flow of blood in the body of the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure all of these were well protected. They woke up. When they woke up, many ulama say that the first things that they said are what we will say when we wake up on the Day of Judgment. Someone asked them, how long have you been asleep? They asked each other. And the reply said, a day or a part of a day. When we wake up on the Day of Judgment, when we ask each other, if you imagine, or someone asks us, how long have you been asleep? We'll say a day or a part of a day. But they were asleep for a total of 309 years. This they did not know. What they knew was that they were hungry. Because some of us fast for 9 hours, 12 hours, we wake up starving, true? Imagine you being asleep for 309 years. They woke up hungry. But look at the second aspect of them as youth. When they looked at each other and the person who they asked to go and get food from town, they said to him, go and get the ta'am which is the purest. Meaning what? Meaning that as a youth, watch that which you eat. Because for you to have total iman, halal and haram food makes a big difference to your spirituality. As soon as they woke up, they said to each other, get that food which is pure. Watch where you buy your food from. You know, it surprises me in London, sometimes these people who come from the Middle East, they come for the summer holidays. You find them eating a Big Mac from McDonald's, and the chicken burger from McDonald's, and Burger King eating everything. You ask him, what are you doing? He says, yes, halal. Halal according to whom? In Middle East we have it halal. Does London look like the Middle East? As in, look around you. Does London look like the Middle East? Even the Middle East, we don't know about the amount of meat that comes from Australia and Brazil. That we'll leave for another night. But let alone that, you found that the first thing those youth said, get the food which is pure. So he went out. Now you imagine, you're wearing clothes which are of 300 years back. 300-year-old clothes, and he's going into town. Everybody's staring at him. What's this person doing today? As in, he looks like he's wearing some clothes from 300 years ago. He goes into town. He wants to buy something, and he's wondering, why is everybody staring at me? He said, what have I done wrong? Little to realize that he looked like someone from the olden days. Imagine now, today in the street, you see somebody wearing the clothes that you would wear in Africa 300 years ago. Straight away you'd think, what are they doing today? Likewise, many were looking at him. He came to buy some food. When he came to buy some food, the person looked at him. He said to him, what are you intending to pay with? He said, here's my money. That person saw an antique, because the coin was 300 years old. He looked at him, and he's looking at the coin, and he's looking at him. He said, no, what are you going to pay for? Like, with what? He said, that's my money. He said, this money is 309 years old, from the time of Dayqanus. As soon as he heard this, he knew that there was something wrong. That person who was selling the food went to the king of the time. Who was the king? Theodosius II. Theodosius II was of those who believed in the message of Jesus. And in their books, they had known that there was a group of youths who left the area of Ephesus. They had left it believing in the message of Jesus, but they left out of fear. Nobody ever knew where they went. Eventually, they were taken to Theodosius II. When he was taken, he told his whole story. Theodosius said, you have to take me towards the rest of your companions. Why? Because he said, you are saints in Christianity. You don't know how important you are in Christianity. So he took him. Before he reached, he quickly went in the cave. As soon as he went in the cave, what did he do? He went in, he told the rest of them, we haven't been asleep for a day or a part of a day. So they said, how long? He said, 309 years. You can imagine how they looked at each other. They looked at each other thinking, 309 years, we've been asleep and we didn't even realize. He said, there's a camp who are coming after us. They said, who? He said, Theodosius II. He said, not Dayqanus. He said, Dayqanus died years ago. It's Theodosius II. They said, what does he believe in? Some narrations say there were two camps. One which wanted them finished, another which believed in them. They all came together in supplication saying, Ya Allah, you are the one who protected us from oppression. We believed in you and you increased us in guidance. Ya Allah, allow us to sleep until the day that they are raised. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them to sleep until the day they are raised. That king, what did he do? He built over them a masjid, a mosque, where people would honor them, their grave would be inside, and people would come and visit them. When Rasulullah narrated this story, why did he narrate it? Because he tried to emphasize on the idea that to build a strong state, the youth have to be the basis of that state. How many times did Rasulullah say, make use of 5 things before you lose them? For example, make use, O Abu Dhar, he tells Abu Dhar, O Abu Dhar, make use of your wealth before poverty. Make use of your free time before occupation. Make use of your health before sickness. Make use of your life before death. And make use of your youth before old age. Because Rasulullah knew that that period of the youth can make or break your future. If there is focus in the youth, then there is success. Whereas if a person goes astray in their youth, then they are always playing catch up. That's why we find in another tradition, we find Amir al-Mu'mineen constantly saying to Imam Hassan in Nahj al-Balagha, "Oh my son Hassan, know that the heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. Whatever you throw on it, it accepts. Therefore I try to mold your heart before it hardened, so you are able to take from my example and apply them into your life." What lines? The heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. Do you know what an uncultivated piece of land is? It's a piece of land nobody has built on. Imagine I'm driving now in Seacliff, for example. I'm driving and I see a piece of land uncultivated. I think to myself, you know what? I can build here a lovely house. Or I can build a lovely building, 8 floors. On the top I'll put a penthouse. At the bottom, underground, we'll put an underground pool, for example, and an overground pool. Underground, you could tell I come from Europe. An overground pool as well because of the weather here. We'll make sure we'll build. I have already thought, how shall I cultivate the land? Then somebody else that night drives past. He says, you know what? I'm probably only going to be given planning permission to build 4 flats here. So what I think I'll do, I'll increase by 6. Nobody's going to say anything. And I'll add a couple of things on the side without getting permission. Both of us are investors. Both of us want to cultivate land. But one of us does it sincerely. Another of us does it behind the law. Amir al-Mu'mineen told Imam Hassan that the heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. It is pure and it is fresh. So he said, whatever is given to it, it accepts. He says, therefore I try to mold your heart before others did. Why? Because with our youth today, either we get in and cultivate their hearts, or I tell you there are millions out there willing to do it before we do. And if we do not do it quicker than they do, then do not be surprised if the youth of this community have hearts being cultivated by those outside the religion of Islam. When Rasulullah built the Islamic State, he builds it with a number of areas we have to apply to our youth today. Because he didn't say the story of Ashab al-Kahf just for us to say it's a nice story. He said the story of Ashab al-Kahf for us to know that if you are a group of youths and you train them, if they sacrifice their life, their message will still be honored by millions in the world today. Therefore, how did Rasulullah build the Islamic State? He built it with his relationship with the youth. Let us explain. The first aspect of building the Islamic State and his role as a prophet was that he made the youth feel that he was approachable. That any leader who wants to build a community has to make the youth of that community feel that the leader is approachable and accessible. Because today we have many imams in our communities, unfortunately, the youth are scared to even speak to them. He wants to ask a question, or she wants to ask a question, but they're scared Maulana might shout at them, or he might frown at them. The first aspect of a relationship between a leader who wants to build a community and the youth is that the youth must feel the leader is approachable and accessible. Look at Rasulullah. On one occasion, Rasulullah has gone out with his companions. They all of a sudden wanted to eat. So one of them came and said, Ya Rasulullah, let's eat some lamb. He said, go ahead. So one of the companions said, Ya Rasulullah, I'll sacrifice the lamb. Another said, I will clean the lamb. Another said that I will cook the lamb. The fourth one was Rasulullah. He said, I'll go and get the wood for the fire. He said, Ya Rasulullah, no. Who are you to go and get the wood? We are your servants. He said, no. I am one of you. I'll go and get the wood and I'll come back. Montesquieu used to say, great leaders are those who stand with their men, not above their men.
He said, Allah does not like to see that companions feel they are better than each other. I am one of you. They were a group of youth. But look at Rasulullah. He said, no problem. I will get the wood. You will kill the animal. You will be the one who cooks it. I will help in this issue. Do you know how this makes the youth feel? It makes them feel that Rasulullah is one of us. That a leader, sometimes there is no harm if that leader goes out with the youth. If the leader plays sports with the youth. If the leader goes to visit the schools of the youth. Rasulullah on another occasion, he was wanting some water for his camels. He not only got the water for his camel, he went and got water for the camels of the youth of Arabia as well. When they see a leader who is older than them, but is accessible, straight away the youth will follow that leader. Number one. Number two, Rasulullah built a social environment for their youth so that the youth did not become idle. Idle thumbs makes the devil's workshop or the devil's workplace. If our youth have nothing to do in the community, then you find them hanging around in the wrong places, smoking the wrong products, drinking the wrong products, looking at the wrong products. Whereas when you build for them a social arena, you will find that those youth, their time is made up with a good social arena. That's why Rasulullah said, teach your children how to swim, and how to ride horses, and how to perform the archery. Do you know that was a metaphor for today? In that time, those were the three sports that were revered. Today, there is no harm if your son plays football, or plays cricket, or plays basketball. Why? Number one, religion is not just about a person staying in sujood for 24 hours of the day. Religion is about balancing a healthy body and a healthy mind. A healthy mind has to be balanced by a healthy body. If a youth has a sporting club where they are able to go and train and exercise, that brings success. Because you imagine, if one of these youths one day became a football player, and he's from the Islamic community, do you know how many youths will look up to him? Zinedine Zidane has never been to any mosque. But because his name is Muslim, and because he may read a couple of verses of the Quran before he plays, the whole Muslim world idolizes Zidane. Look at somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo. However much it hurts to say the name. Look at somebody like him. You find before a match, he makes the cross. Before the match, he remembers Jesus. Do you know how many Portuguese youth around the world become religious because they see their star, who is a youth, remembering Jesus? Whereas when our youths want to excel in sports in the way Rasulullah said, swimming and horse riding and archery, you find the parents saying, what's sport going to get you? Stay in medicine, dentistry, become a lawyer, and why not become a sportsman? One sportsman can be a source of more people coming to Islam than 100,000 million doctors. The idea was what? The idea was on the second level, building a social environment for the youth. Rasulullah built it in this way. Number three, Rasulullah, what did he do? He made sure his message was related to what the youth were thinking. He wasn't talking about things which happened 1,000,000 years ago, or things which don't affect the youth at all. Rasulullah would talk about that which affects the youth. He talked about in the Quran, when it came to the female, he even was willing to go as far as discussing the menstrual cycle in the Quran. With the males, he was willing to discuss the story of Qawm Lut and homosexuality. If these areas were shameful, nobody has modesty, nobody has chastity, nobody has respect like Rasulullah. Don't come and teach me what should be on the mimbar of Rasulullah, when he himself used the mimbar to discuss those issues in the Quran. Likewise, when we want to lead the community and want the youth to be attracted to the community, if you're not going to discuss the issues that affect them, and rather only discuss issues which happened 1,400 years ago, no youth will come towards the religion. No youth. Because they'll say, all we ever hear is history. Nothing related to our life. What did Rasulullah do? He spoke about the modern issues in Arabia. Interest and the economy. He discussed it. He discussed the political issues and discussions with the people of Rome and the people of Egypt. He allowed the youth to feel that he was living in their world, not living somewhere else in a cave. Number 3. Number 4, he gave responsibilities to his youth. He didn't just say, why are the youth all bad? Why aren't they religious? You don't want them to be religious? Give them responsibilities. Not all the time when you want to give... No, he's too young. You can't give him responsibility. 1 minute you're telling me he's bad. The next minute you're telling me he's too young to have a responsibility. There has to be a balance. Rasulullah built the Islamic state by giving responsibilities to young men. Let me name them for you. None of them was older than 30. He gave Atab ibn Usayd when he went to Hunayn. Rasulullah went to fight in Hunayn. He appointed Atab ibn Usayd as governor of Mecca. Some people came and said, Ya Rasulullah, a 21-year-old. Ya Rasulullah, a 21-year-old governs Mecca. Rasulullah said, nobody is as able to govern Mecca when I and my companions are away like Atab ibn Usayd. And that's why in Sirah al-Halabiyya it's narrated, Atab ibn Usayd led the first Salat al-Jama'ah in Mecca. When Rasulullah was away, Atab was 21 years old. Did Rasulullah think Atab is too young? No. He said to those who complained, he said, spiritual excellence is not on age. Spiritual excellence is about the one who has understood God the best of ways. Then he employed number 2, Mu'az ibn Jabal, 29 years old. He made him his representative in Yemen. They say ijtihad was built on Mu'az ibn Jabal. Why? Because before Rasulullah sent him to Yemen, how old was he? 29 years old. He was from the Bani Khazraj, one of the most famous tribes in Medina. Rasulullah said to him, Mu'az, I'm sending you to the people of Yemen for 2 reasons. Number 1, to propagate Islam. Number 2, to collect the zakat. So then he said to him, Mu'az, now that you are governor of Yemen, people are going to ask you questions. How are you going to answer them? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I will answer them according to the Quran. Then he said, what if the answer is not in the Quran? He said, I will answer them according to your sunnah. He said, what if the answer is not in my sunnah? He said, I will exercise ijtihad according to the Quran and the sunnah. Number 3, he sent Ja'far ibn Abu Talib as his representative in Africa. While Ja'far ibn Abu Talib was in his 20s, he sent him to Africa to represent him against Najashi the Christian. Number 4, he sent Usama ibn Zayd to represent him as his commander against Byzantine when Usama was 18 years old. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari fought in every war for Rasulullah except with Usama. He said, you are making me go under an 18-year-old. But Rasulullah did not look at his age. He looked at the quality and he wanted to give him responsibility. When he gave him responsibility, Usama was now growing of age. Usama was to lead that army. It's unfortunate that because of certain companions, we don't need to mention their name, when Rasulullah died, they replaced Usama and they placed Yazid ibn Abu Sufyan. And they made him the commander to the extent that Usama complained to the people of Medina and said, oh people of Medina, know that Rasulullah made me the commander to avenge the death of my father Zayd at Mu'tah, but now the first Khalifa has replaced me with Yazid ibn Abu Sufyan. Rasulullah did not stop there. In the battle of Khaybar, he gave the banner to a young man aged 30 by the name of Ali ibn Abu Talib. 30 years old. Did he think he's too young to lead the community? No. Because Rasulullah wanted to build from the example of Ashab al-Kahf to the example of Mu'az, Atab, to the example of Usama, and the example of Ja'far, the example of Mus'ab ibn Umar, the example of Ammar ibn Yasir, the example of Zubair ibn Awam. He wanted to build an empire based on youths who were dedicated to the religion of Islam. That's why we find, do you know, when Ali ibn Abi Talib was only 30, on that day in Khaybar, his success wasn't something normal. Rasulullah went towards Khaybar. The Jews of Khaybar were there. Rasulullah went. The Jews at that time totaled 14,000 Jews. How many? 14,000. Khaybar was about 96 kilometers away from Medina. And the time all the Jews had gathered together, Rasulullah went with the companions. They stayed at Khaybar for about 3 weeks. On the 3rd week, Abu Bakr got restless. He got up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, give me the banner. Abu Bakr was much older than Ali ibn Abi Talib, true? So if leadership and success is meant to be on age, so he should bring success. He went, he came back, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I can't defeat those Jews. Too powerful. Umar ibn al-Khattab took the banner. He said, I'll bring victory. Again, he was an older person. He went and he took the banner, he came back. Not only did he say, I can't bring victory, he said, they are too powerful for us. It struck terror into the hearts. Rasulullah became disappointed. He said, tomorrow, I will give this banner to a man who Allah and His Prophet love him, and he loves Allah and His Prophet. When he goes towards war, he never turns his back. He always comes back victorious. The companions say that night, we were all waiting. Which one is it? Is it me? Is it him? Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas says, I used to always come and walk in front of Rasulullah so that he would look at me and give me the banner. And what happened was, he said the next day, Rasulullah said, where is Ali ibn Abi Talib? As soon as he said this, they said, Ya Rasulullah, Ali ibn Abi Talib has a sore eye. Ali ibn Abi Talib had a sore eye. They thought we would say this, it means Rasulullah will say, okay, because he said, bring him to me. They brought him, he took from his saliva and placed it in the eye of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amir al-Mu'min says, after that day, I never saw better because of that saliva of Rasulullah. He then said, give me the banner. Listen to what happened. He said, give me the banner. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas said, we were trying to wear our armor. Ali ibn Abi Talib had already run alone by himself. We were saying, oh son of Abu Talib, wait, let us wear our armor. He didn't wait. He said, I will take them on myself. He went. In the opposition of the Jews, there were 3 brothers, Marhab, Harith and Yasir. These were the greatest warriors of the Jews. Marhab says, nobody can defeat me. I am the one whose mother named him Marhab. That night he saw in his dream a lion defeating him. When he saw a dream, the lion defeating him, he had woken up, he said, I am Marhab. Nobody defeats me. My mother gave me this name. In front of him was a young man who said, I am the one whose mother named him Haydar. Haydar means lion. I am the one whose mother named him Haydar. When I go towards the battle, I never return without victory in my hands. He went through the 3 brothers one by one. He was only 30 years old, nothing older. But Rasulullah didn't care about his age. Later on, some people said he's too young to lead the ummah. Was he too young when he lifted Khaybar with his own hands? He lifted Khaybar, which 80 could not lift, 40 could not lift. He lifted it with his own hand and showed that if you give responsibility to any human being, age should not matter. What should matter is their dedication to Allah. That's why when he returned, some people said to him, oh son of Abu Talib, you are a man, your diet, you only drink milk, you have some bread, even your bread is hard. It does not work that you can lift a gate like this. He said, قَلَعْتُ بَابَ خَيْبَرٍ لَا بِطَاقَةٍ جِسْمَانِيَّةٍ وَلَكِنْ بِطَاقَةٍ رَوْحَانِيَّةٍ. I did not lift the gate of Khaybar with a strength that is physical. I lifted the gate of Khaybar with a strength that is spiritual. When he returned, Rasulullah said to him, oh Ali, me and Allah are pleased with you. He began to cry. He said to him, why? He said, I cry because of how Allah and my Prophet are pleased with what I have done. Here, the idea was given that the religion of Islam was built on these great youths, and therefore it is vital that we strengthen the youth of our community. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the following dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma inna narghabu ilayka fi dawlatin karima. تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise our youths with Muhammad and Al Muhammad, to allow us to follow their message and to implement the sunnah of our holy prophet in this life, to allow us to take the youths of Rasulullah as an example, his companions as an example in our life. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise us with his companions on the day of judgment.